Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Laurie, and I'm joined today by Dave, Megan, and Shanthi, who you will have met in a couple of episodes before this about our DBT skills. So if this is your first episode of this series, it might be worth going back and listening to the first one. But just a quick overview, we are kind of going through this DBT for Life book by Diana Partington, who you've also heard on the podcast. And each week we're going through a skill. So we're still in the mindfulness unit right now. All four of us have been through dialectical behavior therapy before, but we all have unique takes on how we use the skills. And so yeah, that's kind of what we're doing today. So the skill that we're going to talk about today is the observe skill and the stop skill. So curious if anybody has any initial thoughts about observe and stop. I know in our last episode, Megan kind of already talked a little bit about the stop skill, just generally. I'm happy to go through the story a little bit. So like we mentioned in the previous episodes, each of the chapters of this book is about a specific skill, and it starts with a bit of a story. And these stories have been collated from the author's experiences as a clinician, so her clients' experiences. So this one is about Thanksgiving and the super fun, as we all know, challenges with having to have family dinners around holidays. Some of you, actually, I don't super know everybody's like family dynamics here, and we don't necessarily have to get into it, but if you want to share them, you're more than welcome to. My family dynamics are definitely complicated when it comes to family gatherings and like holidays, to the point where I'm like over it. Just kind of like this Thanksgiving, I'm just going away with Aaron and my best friend because I'm not going to be around this Thanksgiving. It's going to be great. So in this unit, basically this guy goes back, in this story rather, this guy goes back to his family's house for Thanksgiving, and he's having a hard time with his temper. And so he's just kind of feeling like self-destruction, and getting really angry when I think it's his mom doesn't really validate his experiences, and he wants to like participate and help cook, but she's just kind of like saying, no, we've always done it this way. We're going to do it this way kind of thing. And then this is where we kind of talked in the last chapter about like, then he gets an unexpected text from his therapist with a stop skill reminder. The text he gets from his therapist when he's about to like blow up is stop reminder. Stop what you're doing, take a breath, observe your physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts. Assess how your current actions align with your short-term and long-term goals. If they match, then proceed mindfully. And so basically, long story short, he realizes that losing his shit is not going to be helpful in this situation, and he doesn't blow up because he's able to use the stop skill. So the like overview that they give in the book, there's a really nice like little overview here on page 57. So it says, give yourself a moment to practice the stop skill. So stop what you're doing, take a breath, mentally step back from the situation, observe your physical sensations, your emotions, your thoughts, and your action urge. So again, that bit that's like heavily in emotion mind. And then ask yourself do your actions meet your current goals, and then proceed mindfully. How do people use this skill a lot? What are your thoughts on this skill?
I have a hard time remembering to use this skill. It's one that sounds good in practice, but like, yeah, I just in like a crisis, it's just really easy to get wrapped up in the moment. The idea of setting an alarm is interesting, but like the times that I really need this are when like, I'm just not expecting something to happen. It comes out of left field, and you can't really set an alarm for that.
Yeah, super good point.
Yeah, I thought it was like super convenient in these stories that like just as they're about to blow up, they get a text, and I'm like, man, I need to pay my therapist more so that this happens when I'm about to blow up. They just text me out of the blue and are like, stop. Like, how did you know? So I really empathize with Dave's comment of like, it's hard to remember to do this in the moment. And I think I was mentioning on the last episode the idea of like giving myself kind of a pause, like you can't behave impulsively when you're in emotion mind. And so I guess I kind of use this skill, but I don't necessarily use it as the stop skill, quote unquote, because it is really hard in the like heat of the moment to be like, I'm just going to take a step back, kind of pause, breathe, think, And sometimes it's hard because people on the other side of things don't always let you do that either. So it can be hard to get the space to do it. Not saying that doesn't make it a valuable skill. It just is a little bit harder to practice sometimes.
Yeah, I use bathroom breaks a lot for this kind of thing where I'm like, especially at family things, because you're right, like sometimes people will continue to like just harp on the same thing and you're like, I can't. And so I'll just be like, actually, I have to go to the washroom. And then I'll just sit there, or restroom if you're American, and I'll just like sit there and be like, okay, this is my timeout zone. Nobody's going to come banging on the door being like, hey, we're not done this argument. And people often like don't kind of notice that that's like leaving the situation, even though it totally is. And I think about this story that I can't remember who it was, but one of my relatives was telling me about this like other family member that they have, and it's super frustrating because they'll be in the middle of this heated argument, and then the family member will just like leave, and they'll come back eventually, but they'll just leave. And they were kind of like bitching about this person, and I was like, actually, what they're doing is like super mindful, super intentional, and like actually really, really skillful, because that's super hard to do. And they were like, oh yeah, I've never thought about the fact that like they weren't just like up and leaving out of like disrespect. They were almost up and leaving out of respect. And that was like a really helpful reframe. And I think like, maybe they could communicate that better when they're leaving, but hey man, they're doing better than most of us by the ability to actually leave. What do you think, Shanthi? Do you use the stop skill much?
The stop skill like was the first thing in DBT that really stuck with me the first time I did DBT. And I think what helps me a lot when I use it is just the visual of it, like seeing a stop sign. And that like it was when I was doing DBT for the first time, the first skill that I was like, okay, maybe this is something I can do. And sometimes for me, like the stop, it's just breathing, stop and breathe. Like I don't even go change my thinking or anything. Like it's just the idea of just breathing is slowing down.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people about like the visual of it is helpful because of the breathing. And so I don't know if you do this, but they like picture a stop sign and then they like trace their breathing along the, is it hexagon? Whatever it is, edges. I'm personally not super visual, so the like visual of the stop sign doesn't really help, but the concept is incredibly helpful for me, because even if it's like all you need is 1 second of pause a lot of the time to be able to not like mess up,
I think it's also important to recognize that like what we've been talking about so far is like practicing the skills, right? And like the more that you practice, the quicker you're going to be when utilizing them. Like maybe the first time you do it, it maybe takes you 5 minutes to use the stop skill. Well, eventually it could be as quick as like just taking a breath helps you reframe, right? And I also think in terms of like what Laurie was saying, having the ability to like practice these skills with somebody who you're not already in a lot of like conflict with, or who isn't a high tension person for you. Like, for example, with my partner, I practice a lot of my skills in like our everyday conversation. I'll go, okay, I think I need to like take a break, or like just take a pause to reframe. And having that safe space allows it a lot better than when I'm like wanting to yell at my mom, for example, or something like that. Is like, okay, well, I've practiced this with my safe space. Now I can practice this with like something that might feel a little more tense. And I think that's really helpful with the skills.
Yeah, totally. I find this one maybe less easy to practice with in safety, because you kind of need it to be a bit elevated to be able to use it, right? Because I could stop right now and be like, hey guys, like I'm out. I need a minute because I'm not heightened. But like I'm super glad that you're able to practice that in a different way. Sometimes I'll combine the various skills around like going for a walk is my stop. And so I'll like intentionally be like, oh, I just need to go grab some air for a second, or like kind of practicing taking that break before it gets heightened. But it's certainly hard to practice this one, I find.
I mean, we could challenge you right now. Just make you do the stop on the podcast. Stop, take
Well,
a
there's
breath,
that.
observe your physical sensations, your emotions, your thoughts, and your action urge, and then proceed.
Yeah, it's true. I
There
just
is
don't have
something,
an action urge, I guess, is the thing, right now.
I think there is something to what you said. Look, there's some people who like, they just couldn't care less about other people's feelings. And so leaving the room or like not talking or checking out is like not a big deal. I think that is one thing that can it makes it difficult for me to like, to use the skill other than particularly people that I have more of a like personal relationship as opposed to like people at the car rental agency or something like that, where it's like, I'm never going to see these people again. Like, I don't care if I I don't care what they think if I take a break. Although I kind of do. It does occur to me that like sometimes with these skills, it's good to talk about it because sometimes I find I'm using them and I don't really realize that I'm using them. And so, it occurs to me that like one of the things I've been doing recently, and it doesn't feel great always, but like when I'm starting to get into a conflict with somebody over text, I can feel it's starting to happen. There have been times when, it feels like it's not getting effective anymore. I'll just say like, I'm going to block you for a while. So they don't like sort of keep talking and think that I'm like, that I know what they're saying. And then I'll just like, just do it and come back later. And, I definitely feel better. I mean, it didn't feel great the first few times I did it because I felt rude, but also like, it does mean that like, if there's actual things that need to be discussed or something like that, they get discussed in an effective way and not, with sort of escalating conflict. I guess I do use it sometimes.
That's a good point. I've done that too, where I'll block someone, not necessarily because I like never want to talk to them again, but because sometimes, especially if it's two people with emotion dysregulation going back and forth, and it's like, it's just going to escalate and escalate and escalate. And it's like, one of us needs to stop. It can be either of us, but like, if we both keep going, this is never going to end and it's going to get so, so horrible. Whereas if one of us can just like take that break for the both of us, it'll be so much better. Yeah, so I definitely resonate with that. And it is a good opportunity to just like block people temporarily or forever if you want. But I would say the stops in the like essence of the stop skill, it would be a temporary block rather than a permanent one. How does the skill feel for you, Shanthi? Like, do you said that like the visual is a helpful thing for you, but like, how do you remind yourself of the visual?
I'm not the greatest at it, but if I find myself like, because I like when you pay attention to your breathing, like if I'm breathing too quickly, like I'll look for signs in my body, and like if that's getting out of hand, that's when I use it.
Yeah, that's great. It's like if you can recognize those signs in your body, that's such a like bonus because some people can't at all.
Yeah, I'm bad at that too. Like actually right now I'm in somatic therapy, and when she asked me, what are you feeling in your body right now? Like I panic for a second. I don't know what's happening in my body. Don't ask me that question. But with
like, what
breathing, I
body?
think, yeah, I'm a disembodied head. But with breathing, I think it's like, I think like, oh wait, it's hard to breathe right now. Let me stop. And then that's how I
that's
use
smart. It. And sometimes it's only like 1 or 2 breaths that you need, right? If you can like do a 4 count breath, I find like for me, I think I use this the most in disagreements with people and like especially over text like Dave was saying, but then also urges to self-harm. If I can like literally take 5 seconds, I can usually not self-harm because it's just enough time. I think this is where the part that I had kind of forgot about that came up in this book for me is like what are your goals? And does this action align with your goals? I had completely forgotten that was part of stop, but I guess again, like you kind of just start naturally doing it where like, well, my goal is to not self-harm. So I guess this isn't aligned with my goals. Recently that's been more difficult for me, I would say, in terms of like the stop has to be so long that I just get impulsive in the middle of it. But it has helped me a lot over the years around self-harm and impulsive breaking up of relationships, which happens too.
I mean, this feels like one of those skills you could also practice driving, unless you live way out in the country and no one else is around. Sucked in and upset, and like, I find that I have been able to do this before, where like I noticed that I have their, notice it. You have the urge to like get upset and honk a horn and things like that. And, it's a good time to practice. If my short-term goal is to get where I want to go, my long-term goal is not to have somebody get out of their car with a hammer and come after me. And like, so that's another suggestion I would have, a way to practice this.
It's a good goal. Please don't go after Dave with hammers. Rule number 1. But then you have like a physical stop sign or even a stop light. Like if you can pause just long enough for the stoplight to change from one color to another, that's probably a long enough pause. So that might help for like the visual learners like Shanthi to, remind yourself. Just trying to think about like, they also talk about observe in the midst of this stop skill chapter of the book. And this is like an area of mindfulness that we were talking in the last episode about how like movement is helpful for mindfulness or like tangible things that you can kind of focus on. But I also think that the observe skill was really helpful for me when I was starting to learn mindfulness, like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill of like 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear. I can never remember what order it's supposed to go in, but it doesn't really matter because I can be grounded in reality and it's not like kind of a like fluffy, I don't know, like fluffy hypothetical of just like stop thinking about stuff.
Yeah, it's like what is actually going on here? Not sort of like just what are the narratives I have built up in my mind? Like what are the things from past times that I've baked into what's going on? Which is why I like how in this book they never really like focused on the observed stuff. I always sort of thought about it as its own separate skill, but because then that sort of bleeds into observing physical sensations and then emotions and then thoughts and action urges, and so it's sort of like a ladder where you can sort of prime that pump by first starting with like the really physical stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like even if you take that 5 seconds to say like I see a tree and it has burgundy leaves, it's part of the observe skill, or sorry, it's part of the stop skill, but it's also like a way to take that like small pause if you need something more tangible. It's like I Spy for adults.
I'm pretty bad at the observe skill because it's hard for me to do things non-judgmentally. I just feel like I judge everything, and like even like especially I should say like my thoughts and like my patterns, like, oh, you're doing this again, like how could you, like, and so observe is a tough one for me.
Yeah. The non-judgmental thing, I don't know if I'll ever get. Have you like made any progress in that respect, or like have any advice for people that struggle with the non-judgmental side of things?
No advice.
Because it comes up a lot in DBT. Like it's super, like, to be honest, like kind of frustrating how often it comes up because it's so hard to do. And like, I kind of love being judgy. I hate to say that, but like I kind of love it.
I mean, it's in some ways, isn't it? It's less about like I don't think DBT says that we're not allowed to have opinions or we're not allowed to be offended or be annoyed. Sometimes I think there's just they're trying to come up with the right word to use, and it doesn't exactly capture what they're trying to get at. And this is one of those times. And I think what they really mean more is like being aware of your biases. What's behind the emotion? What's behind the feeling? Are they connected, or is it just that like, this person's face reminds me of someone? And I think that's what the non-judgmental thing has to do with more than anything.
Especially when we've split on people. Like you say you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but like so splitting, is anybody good at describing splitting? It's kind of like the black and white of relationships, I guess, of like, I either hate you or I love you, and there's kind of no in between, and it can like switch quite readily. And like, there's so many examples in my life where like that switch has happened from like, you're great to you're horrible. And even though I'm able to be aware of that and know that there's a bias there for myself, I just judge every single thing that person does. To me, they can do no right, regardless of the fact that I know that that's because I'm thinking in them of them in black and white. But I just, again, it's like we talked about with Wise Mind, right? Like I know that I'm an emotion mind. I know that this isn't rational. I know that there's an in-between called wise mind, but I still hate this person and everything that they do.
People are just not good people, right? So
there you go.
But that I just want to ask though, have you ever? I've only had it switch from liking someone to not liking someone. Have you ever had it go has anyone ever had it go the other way where you thought someone was horrible and then you changed your opinion and all of a sudden you thought they were great? Because I've never had that happen.
I do that sometimes, like with memories of people who passed, like my mom. Like one day I'll think like she was great, she taught me how to read, blah blah blah, and then other day it's like, oh my god, this was abusive, that was abusive. Like, how did I get through that? So it goes back and forth sometimes.
That's really interesting. What about for anyone that is like currently in your life, like you're still interacting with them on a regular basis? Have you ever had that switch like that?
To a lesser degree, but yeah. Like it's not as like 100% black and white, but going back and forth, yeah, sometimes I do that.
Yeah. How about you, Megan?
I think for me, it's a lot of like when I'm dealing with like favorite personism of like at one point in time they were great and then now they're like they like forgot something or something and now they are the worst person in the entire world and then now like then I like go back to like they're the greatest person ever and like that dichotomy of like favorite personism I think is a big one. I can't say that I've ever started, I think, hating someone or like them really pissing me off and then going to like, I adore you. I think I have to start with the like, I adore you at the beginning for that flip to kind of come back full circle.
Yeah, I think it's for me, I can think of situations where I've disliked someone and then liked someone, but not to the extreme that splitting is. It's always, like you said, Dave, from I love you to I hate you. And I do agree that sometimes for me, the favorite person situation, we all know I have a favorite person problem at the moment. And like that favorite person, it's usually I love you, I'm obsessed with you, you're the best person. But then on occasion, they'll do something where I'm like, no, actually, you're a bad person. But I think it's like me trying to convince myself that they're no longer my favorite person. And so it's temporary. It's never been, now you're a horrible person fully. I kind of wish that were the case because it would probably be a lot easier. But one day, maybe we'll get there. Maybe I'll just super hate this person one day. But that is not today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Superfeeler podcast. Today's episode was recorded on the unceded and traditional territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me reach more listeners like you, and we're always looking for improving the podcast. Remember, you can always stay connected with me on social media. You can follow us. The show notes will have all of the details for Instagram profiles. If you want to support the podcast and help me continue to bring great content, please consider joining the Superfeeler community on Patreon. Your support really means the world to me, and there's a variety of different options for support, including some free ones. For all information about the Superfeelers Club, which is the peer support that we run, including upcoming events and resources, head over to Eventbrite or laurieevanson.com for more information. If you have a topic that you want me to cover or a guest you'd love to hear from, please send me the suggestions. Always happy to hear them. Until next time, keep on super feeling and living authentically. This is Laurie signing off of the Superfeeler podcast.